Noisy Pixel.
What is going on, nerds? Mark DeMatti here, back with another episode of Noisy Pixel Top Lists. I don't know if you could say the word lists, but it's very difficult. Anyway, in this episode, we are going to go over the best mainline games in the Final Fantasy series. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Coming in at a strong 5th place, we have Final Fantasy VI. Even as gaming was stepping into 3D at the time, none of the primitive polygon games could compare to Final Fantasy VI, a true swan song for the Super NES that pushed the boundaries of the 16-bit hardware and gave players an epic quest that is still quite staggering in length, even by today's RPG benchmarks. With a massive cast of characters, this was Final Fantasy with many memorable characters, the most being its Joker-esque mad villain, Kefka. There has never been a JRPG villain so comically charming, yet so unbelievably evil at the same time. Ironically enough, striking into 4th place is Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy IV perhaps set the benchmark of storytelling for all subsequent Final Fantasy games, all the way to Final Fantasy XV. While the first 3 games focused on a classic good versus evil premise, with textbook fantasy characters, Final Fantasy IV decided to up the ante by delivering the most melodramatic storyline gamers had ever seen at that point. Even now, the Shakespearean cast of characters and crazy plot, devices such as a trip to the moon would set the tone for the narrative and style of future games. Only Final Fantasy VIII managed to further the angsty melodrama even further. Also notable was the active time battle system, which became the genesis of the free-flowing battle system we see today in the likes of Final Fantasy VII Remake. The unlucky 3rd place goes to Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X is notable for many reasons. It was the first true 128-bit entry for the series with Hollywood-sized production values. From the sweeping CGI cutscenes to the voice acting, a first for the series. The game really put the series on the map as a global phenomenon. Fittingly, it would also be one of the last Final Fantasy games created under the helm of series founder Hironobu Sakaguchi, after which he would part ways in 2004 and from Mistwalker Studios. Lavish production values and presentation aside, Final Fantasy X gave players of the series' best minigames in Blitzball and was popular enough to warrant its own direct sequel in Final Fantasy X-2. The Final Fantasy game taking the 2nd place award will go to Final Fantasy IX. After 3 games taking place in the dense sci-fi setting with an angsty cast of characters, Final Fantasy IX was a true return to form and one of the last major games released for PS1. Returning to its wholesome fantasy roots, Final Fantasy IX brought back mages and wizards in a style with a rich fairy tale narrative that still holds powerful nostalgia for longtime fans. The game was future-proof to the extent that the HD remasters which would follow allowed the game's assets to reach their full artistic and visual potential, having been compressed to meet the requirements of PS1 initially. With the remaster out on every major platform now, this is an easy recommendation to anyone new to the world of Final Fantasy. And everybody, the moment that you have been waiting for all video, I think we can all expect the winner here, but I don't know, some people might disagree. The winner goes to Final Fantasy VII. No Final Fantasy game or JRPG in general shaped the genre and gaming culture as a whole quite like Final Fantasy VII. Back then, it was the perfect title for PS1 as the very culture of gaming shifted towards mature themes and older audiences. Final Fantasy VII packed a brooding narrative and a still relevant environmental message that would spawn films and a full remake on PS4. The popularity of this game is undeniably timeless, and whether you play the blocky PS1 original or the stunning remake, you can't go wrong with the most iconic and influential JRPG that ever was. No Final Fantasy list, like we said, is ever going to be decisive and perfect, so share some of your favorites with us in the comments below. And Noisy Nerds, I thank you very much for watching this video. Drop a comment, drop a like, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. We got some more top lists coming and just general Noisy Pixel content. So we really thank you, and you know the deal. We're a group of gamers doing things with games. Peace out, nerds.